Billionaire CEO opened his Rolls-Royce window. Snow fell quietly over Chicago that night, blanketing the streets in silence and secret. In the back of a black Rolls-Royce, billionaire Jonathan Maddox sat alone, cold and untouchable, until two homeless twin girls knocked on his window. One was crying. The other was wearing the same sapphire ring he gave his first love, 20 years ago. And in that moment, his past, his guilt, and a love he thought was buried, came flooding back. If I hadn't left you that night, maybe everything would have been different. He had no idea those girls were his daughters. Chicago in December could be cruel. The wind off Lake Michigan cut through even the thickest coats, turning breath into fog and streets into glass. On nights like this, people hurriedly, heads down, hands buried, hearts closed. But amid the rush, on the corner of East Monroe and Wabash, two little girls stood barefoot in the snow. Their threadbare coats flapped like torn sails, and their fingers, red, raw, trembling, clung to a paper cup that held exactly 47 cents and a peppermint wrapper. They looked no older than 6. "Emma," whispered the younger one, her lips blue. I think he's asleep." "Normally," said the older, eyes sharper despite her matching age. "That's a Rolls-Royce. People like him don't sleep in scars." She squinted through the fogged glass. The man in the back seat wore a midnight black coat, hands folded, head bowed as if lost in a world far from theirs. Everything about him screamed distance. Wealth, power, detachment. "Then why hasn't he moved?" the younger one whispered again. Emma hesitated. Then, with a quiet courage only the desperate know, she knocked. Twice. No answer. Then, the window rolled down, slowly, mechanically, like the world was holding its breath. The man inside turned. His face was pale, handsome, grayed not by age but by sorrow. Jonathan Maddox, billionaire, founder of Maddox Enterprises, a man who hadn't truly smiled, in almost 15 years. The world saw him as a legend, but tonight he felt more like a ghost, and now 2 little ghosts were staring right back at him. "What are you doing out here?" His voice was hoarse, unused. Emma didn't answer. Instead, her sister stepped forward and held out something in her hand. Not the cup, not a plea, a ring. A sapphire ring, oval cut, white gold band, elegant, familiar. Jonathan's heart stopped. It couldn't be. It couldn't. But it was. The ring he gave Rachel Monroe, his college sweetheart. The only woman who ever saw the real man behind the empire. The woman he left without warning, without explanation, because his father threatened to cut him off if he didn't marry into old money. And he did. And he regretted it every day since. The little girl holding the ring looked just like Rachel. His throat closed. "Where did you get that?" he asked, voice barely above the snow's hush. "Mom gave it to us," Emma said finally. "Said it was from our dad, but we never met him." Jonathan's hand shook. His driver, noticing the sudden stillness in the rearview mirror, lowered the partition. But Jonathan didn't answer. He was frozen, not from the cold, but from recognition. A curve of their cheeks. The dimples when they spoke. The stubborn fire in Emma's eyes. It was her. It was Rachel's daughters. And they were his. "My name is Emma," the older one said, standing straighter now, braver. "This is Olivia. We're twins, and we live in the shelter most nights." Jonathan couldn't breathe, couldn't move. "I just thought, maybe you'd help. People like you always drive away." And just like that, he was back in that college dorm, watching Rachel cry as he closed the door on the life they could have had. 15 years earlier. Northwestern University, Evanston. She wore a sundress the night he gave her that ring. The lake glowed behind them, and fireflies danced like tiny lanterns in the trees. He had no title then, no money, no legacy. Just dreams. And her. Rachel Monroe was the daughter of a school librarian and a steelworker. Honest, brilliant, humble. She didn't care about Wall Street or wine cellars. She cared about kindness, about children, about building a life rooted in love. And for 3 years she loved Jonathan, the real him. Before the boardrooms, before the betrayal. But when his father gave him an ultimatum, leave her or lose the family fortune, he caved. He handed her that ring the week before graduation, promised forever, then vanished. She wrote. He didn't reply. She called. He never picked up. Rachel Monroe disappeared from his life like a name washed off glass. Until tonight. Until her daughters, his daughter, stood outside his car in the snow, holding a ring that haunted him for over a decade. Back in the present, Jonathan finally spoke. "Where's your mother now?" His voice cracked. Emma's shoulders stiffened. "She passed last year. Cancer. She told us not to hate him. She said he probably didn't know." "Didn't know?" "You didn't. But now he did." He clenched the edge of his coat. His eyes burned. "Come in, please." But Emma hesitated. "You're not going to take us away, are you?" Jonathan looked her straight in the eye, seeing not a child, but a survivor. Just like her mother. "No problem," he said, steady now. "I'm going to bring you home." And just like that, the door that was once closed opened again. But this time, it wasn't for Rachel. It was for the 2 little girls she left behind. And the man who once betrayed love now had a chance to redeem it. Section 1. The Will. The Shelter and the Ghost of Rachel Monroe. The snow had turned to sleet by the time Jonathan Maddox stepped out of the black Rolls-Royce, carrying Olivia in his arms and keeping Emma tucked tightly under the curve of his coat. They didn't speak much on the drive to his penthouse, overlooking the Chicago River. Emma clutched her mother's worn handbag to her chest like it was armor. Olivia eventually fell asleep, thumb in mouth, safe for the first time in months. But Jonathan sat like stone. The sapphire ring still burned in his pocket like a live coal. He had searched for Rachel once, years ago, quietly, ashamedly, but by then she was gone, changed her last name back to Monroe, left no trace, and part of him believed he deserved never to find her. But now, her memory lived on, in the steady, storm-hardened eyes of her daughters, and the girls he didn't know existed, and the family he never fought for. He carried them home. But the ghosts came too. The penthouse was all glass and silence, expansive, cold, perfect, a place built for deals, not for children. The moment they stepped inside, Emma flinched. She scanned the room like a soldier in enemy territory, counting exits, looking for traps. "You don't have to be afraid here," Jonathan said softly. Emma didn't answer. She simply set her sister down on the plush white couch, then stood beside her like a guard dog, her arms crossed. "I'll have a room made up for both of you tonight. Warm beds, clothes, food." Still nothing. He sighed, then walked over to the minibar and pulled out 2 juice boxes. "I'm afraid I don't keep much on hand for guests your age." Emma stared, then, cautiously, took one. Olivia stirred. "Mommy?" Jonathan froze. Emma gently patted her sister's head. "Shh, go back to sleep. I'm here." "Where's Mommy?" Olivia mumbled. Emma hesitated, then whispered the words she had memorized. "She's watching from the sky. Like the North Star, always the brightest one." And Jonathan, powerful, feared, undefeated in business, turned away and covered his mouth, trying not to shatter in front of them. The next morning, Emma was already awake when he entered the guest suite. She had made the bed. Olivia was dressed in an oversized hoodie and socks that didn't match. A few crumbs on the plate hinted at their breakfast. You have school?" he asked gently. "I know," Emma said. "We left that shelter last week. The social worker doesn't know yet. They might send us somewhere else. Somewhere apart." Jonathan sat down, heart heavy. "Won't happen," he said quietly. "Not now." And that's when he opened the envelope. Rachel's handwriting. "Dear Emma and Olivia, if you're reading this, it means I'm not with you anymore. I'm sorry. I tried to fight harder. But I want you to know something very important. You are loved beyond measure, and you are not a mistake. You are the light of my life. Your father? His name is Jonathan Maddox. He didn't leave you. He just never knew you existed. He's a good man. He just forgot how to be one for a little while. If you ever find him, give him the ring. He'll remember me. And maybe he'll remember who he used to be too. Of love you always. Ma. Jonathan stared at the letter. His hands shook. Emma watched him, her face unreadable. And then, in a voice far too grown for a child, she said, "Why did you leave her?" Jonathan blinked. "I didn't mean to. I thought I was protecting her. From my father, from the life they would destroy if we stayed together. But I see now, I wasn't protecting her. I was protecting myself." Emma didn't cry. She just nodded, quiet, processing. Then she said something that pierced him deeper than anything else. "She cried for you at night, even when she thought we were asleep." Jonathan looked away. A part of him wished she'd scream at him, hit him, call him what he was. Coward, fool, traitor to love. But Emma didn't. She just sat there. And that was worse. By noon, his attorney was in the penthouse, papers spread across the table. She left a will, the attorney confirmed. Rachel Monroe passed quietly in a hospice center in Aurora. She named no legal guardian, but she did include this. He slid forward a copy. A single line. "In the event of my death, if Jonathan Maddox is alive, please let him raise them. I forgive him, I trust him, and I know he'll do right by them, even if he never did by me." Jonathan closed his eyes, grief hitting like a wave. "I want custody," he said firmly, "whatever it takes." The lawyer nodded. "It'll take a background check, a hearing, but given your standing and the mother's written intent, it's very likely." "Good, then prepare everything." The lawyer hesitated. Rachel also left behind a diary. The hospice nurse saved it. She wanted the girls to have it one day. Or you. Jonathan stared at the worn leather-bound journal. He took it in his hands like it was something holy. And on the first page, written in Rachel's delicate script, were the words, "I just stayed. If he'd just fought for us, everything might have been different." That night, Jonathan stood alone in the nursery. It used to be a gym, cold, lifeless, now transformed. Toys, warmth, curtains that didn't cost a fortune but made a room feel safe. He looked out the window. Snow was falling again. But inside it was quiet, peaceful. And from down the hall he heard a sound he hadn't heard in 15 years. Laughter. Emma was giggling at Olivia's impression of their mom. And just like that, for a moment, Rachel was alive again. In their voices, in their silliness, in the breath between sorrow and healing. Jonathan placed the ring on his nightstand and whispered to the silence, "I had just stayed. If I hadn't been so afraid." He swallowed hard. "I'm here now. I won't fail them again." Section 2. The Custody Battle, the Ring, and a Woman from the Past. 3 days later, the press got wind of it. It started with a photo, grainy, shot from across the street. Jonathan Maddox, once dubbed the Iceman of Wall Street, exiting the Chicago family court with a little girl holding his hand, and another asleep against his chest. It went viral within hours. Billionaire CEO secretly father of 2? Jonathan Maddox breaks silence with tear-stained custody plea. Who is Rachel Monroe, the forgotten woman who changed a kingmaker's life? Jonathan hated attention like this, but he didn't flinch, because this time he had something worth fighting for. Inside the courtroom, it felt more like a trial than a hearing. The judge was sharp, seasoned, and not easily swayed by wealth or charm. "You're telling me," she said, adjusting her glasses, "you had no idea these children existed until last week?" "That's correct, Your Honor," Jonathan replied, his voice steady. "Rachel never told me she was pregnant. We were separated under very difficult circumstances. She wrote this letter. The judge held up Rachel's will, entrusting the children to you. And I intend to honor her wish with everything I have. The judge raised a brow. Do you have experience raising children, Mr. Maddock? No, he admitted, but I've built empires, protected thousands of jobs. I've made mistakes in my personal life, but I won't fail these girls. Not again. Behind him, Emma sat on the bench beside her court-appointed guardian. Her hands were folded in her lap. Her eyes didn't blink. She's testing you, the guardian whispered. She doesn't trust easily, but she's watching everything. Jonathan nodded. He knew. He needed her to see that he would show up this time, even when it got ugly. Especially then. That night, as the city lights blinked like stars below the penthouse window, Jonathan sat in his study, reading Rachel's diary by lamplight. April 5th. Emma drew him again today. A man with kind eyes. She doesn't know his name. I told her he's the one who gave her those eyes. Sometimes I wonder, if Jonathan had just knocked on the door one last time, would I have opened it? The words hit him like fists. He closed the book. And that's when the buzzer rang. He wasn't expecting anyone. But when he looked at the monitor, the blood drained from his face. Standing in the lobby, heels sharp, lips red, coat immaculate, was Charlotte Whitman. Charlotte was a name no one dared whisper in Jonathan's world. Not since the scandal. She had once been his vice president, his lover, and the PR princess who could spin gold out of ashes. Until she leaked Rachel's name to the press, years ago. Calculated move, meant to erase the past and secure her future as Mrs. Maddox. She never forgave her. But she came anyway. And this time, she brought something in her hand. An envelope. And a look of remorse Jonathan hadn't seen since the day he told her to leave. I'm not here to fight, she said when he finally opened the door. I saw the photos. The girls. He didn't invite her in. She handed him the envelope. What's this? He asked coldly. Something Rachel mailed to my office, Charlotte said. A long time ago. I never had the guts to open it, but after seeing those kids, I knew. Maybe I owed you the truth. He stared at her. Charlotte swallowed. She wrote me. A letter, one woman to another. I didn't deserve her grace. And with that, she walked away into the night. Jonathan sat down, hands trembling. The envelope was old, postmarked 4 years ago. Inside, a single folded page. Dear Charlotte, I don't hate you. I used to, but hate is heavy. I'm too tired now. I just hope one day, if you see him again, tell him I forgave him. And you. Life is too short to carry knives in your back. Let the girls be free of it all. Let love be louder than shame. Rachel. Jonathan let the letter fall to the floor. And for the first time in years, he cried. The next day, the judge made her decision. Over her glasses, eyes softened by something even steel couldn't cut. Truth. Mr. Maddox, this court finds sufficient cause to grant you temporary custody of both children pending review. You'll undergo parenting classes, home evaluations, and weekly check-ins. Jonathan nodded. Understood, Your Honor. I will say this, the judge added, her tone almost motherly. Money doesn't make a father, but showing up when it counts, that's a Emma looked up. Their eyes met. And this time, she didn't look away. That night, Emma crawled into bed beside her sister and whispered, He stayed. Olivia murmured, Daddy? Emma hesitated, and then nodded, her small voice trembling. Daddy and... In the hall, Jonathan stood outside their door, hearing every word. His chest cracked open with the sound of it. And Rachel's ring, once locked away in guilt, now hung from a chain around his neck. Not as a weight, but as a vow. Section 3. Emma's wall, Olivia's secret, and the journal under the floorboards. There are rooms in a home you don't touch right away. Jonathan had renovated the entire penthouse in a week, replaced the cold marble with warm hardwoods, swapped out abstract art for children's bookcases, added color where grief had once been king. But room 4B, Rachel's old studio, he left untouched. Because the moment he crossed its threshold, the air changed. It still smelled like her, vanilla, charcoal, and a little lavender. It was the only place in the world where Emma would speak freely, and only to the walls. The room was dimly lit by soft fairy lights Emma had insisted on stringing up herself. She spent hours there after school, sketching in silence, whispering to corners, tracing words into her arm with invisible ink. Jonathan watched her from the doorframe one evening. She was drawing something again. Not stick figures, not castles or rainbows, but a woman, barefoot, crying, standing in a storm. He cleared his throat gently. "Hey, sweetheart." Emma jumped, closed the sketchbook. "I'm sorry," he said quickly. "Didn't mean to scare you." She didn't answer, just hugged the book to her chest like armor. "I made mac and cheese," he said. "Extra cheese, the way your mom used to." Emma didn't budge. Then she whispered, barely audible, "She cried when you left." Jonathan blinked. "What?" Emma stared at the wall. "Not him. She thought you'd come back, but the door stayed closed." Jonathan stepped inside, slowly, like approaching a wounded bird. He knelt beside her. "I didn't know she was carrying you," he said softly. "I swear to you, Emma, if I had—" "Why, she did," Emma cut in, still looking away. "And she waited, every day." Pause. Then she added something Jonathan would never forget. "She used to talk to this wall, right here. Said it was her secret place. Said it was where she hid the part of her that still loved you." Jonathan turned his gaze to the wall. It was just drywall and paint, but in that moment it became sacred. The next morning, Olivia started screaming. Jonathan rushed into the bedroom. She was curled into a ball on the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. "Liv. Hey, what is it? Are you hurt?" She shook her head violently, pointing to her bed, to the floor beneath it. Jonathan pulled the mattress aside, then lifted the thin plywood board that had come loose. There, nestled under the floorboards, was a small red leather journal. Olivia clutched her stuffed rabbit tightly, still shaking. "She said never to open it," she cried. "She said it was only for when I forgot her voice." Jonathan picked up the journal with reverence. It was Rachel's handwriting on the front. "My girls, when the world forgets my name, may you remember my heart." His hands trembled. Inside were letters, dozens of them, written in Rachel's looping, elegant script. Each one dated, each one addressed to a future that now arrived too soon. That night, after Olivia fell asleep beside Emma, Jonathan stayed up reading. April 3rd. Today, Emma asked me why the moon follows us home. I told her it's because even the night wants to know we're safe. I wonder if she'll remember that. I wonder if she'll forgive the silence. November 20th. Olivia cried in her sleep. She misses the sound of a man's laugh. I play old voicemails of you sometimes, just so they know they came from love, even if love was broken. And December 24th. I almost mailed the ring today. Yours, the one you gave me before it all fell apart. But I couldn't let go of it. Not yet. Maybe someday. Jonathan's chest heaved. He took the ring from around his neck and laid it gently on the page. "I should have come back," he whispered into the silence. "God, Rachel, I should have come back." The next morning, Emma spoke again. All sentences. Not to the walls this time. To him. "We love her still?" she asked. Jonathan turned, startled. They were on the rooftop garden, Rachel's old sanctuary, now filled. He nodded. "Yes, I do." Emma bit her lip. "Then why didn't you fight for her?" Jonna knelt down to her level. "I didn't know how," he said. "I thought if I stayed away, I'd be doing her a favor." Emma frowned. "That's not how love works." Jonathan laughed through the ache. No, no, it isn't. She reached into her jacket pocket and handed him a crumpled drawing. It was him, holding two little girls, and Rachel, watching from the stars above. She said you were the bravest man she ever knew, Emma whispered. I want that to be true. Jonathan folded the picture with care. It will be, he said, because I have something worth being brave for now. That evening, a call came from Child Services. The evaluator had flagged a concern. Olivia wasn't speaking to her teachers, as drawing disturbing images, dark, violent, chaotic. They wanted a psychological assessment. Jonathan sat quietly on the edge of his bed. He didn't panic. He went to room 4B, sat on the floor with both girls, and read Rachel's journal out loud. Every night, every single word. He let them hear their mother's voice in his, until the shadows in their hearts began to soften, till the crying at night turned to sleep, until Olivia whispered, "Daddy?" for the first time. And Emma stopped talking to the wall because she finally trusted the man in the room. But something else was waiting inside that journal. A final letter, tucked between 2 pages, folded like it had been rewritten 100 times. Unopened, unsent, addressed not to the girls, but to Jonathan. And when he opened it, 3 words leapt from the page. I die. His pulse spiked. Because the next lines would reveal a truth no one was prepared for. A truth that could break everything, but finally make it whole. Check-in 4. If I die, the letter Rachel never sent, and the man who wasn't their father. There are some truths so sharp, they don't cut you until you breathe. Jonathan sat alone in the rooftop garden, Rachel's final letter trembling in his hands like a confession that refused to stay buried. The night wind was quiet, almost reverent. The girls were asleep inside, unaware that their world was about to tilt. He unfolded the page. The handwriting was rushed, not like the others. There were ink smudges, tear stains. At the top, in bold, shaky pen. If I die, don't let them go to him. Jonathan blinked. What? His pulse quickened. He read on. Jonathan, if you're reading this, it means I didn't get to finish what I started. I'm sorry. I was trying to protect them. From him, from the man they never should have known. You were the father in every way that mattered, but biologically, they aren't yours. I wanted to tell you. God, I tried. But you had already walked away, and I was too proud to chase you. His name is Marcus Caldwell. You know who he is, you know what he's capable of. I thought I was stronger than that. But the girls, they were never a mistake. They're everything good I ever did, and I'm... Jonathan felt his stomach hollow out. Marcus Caldwell. That name hadn't passed through his life in nearly a decade, but it still rang like a curse. Venture capitalist, ruthless, predatory, the kind of man who treated people like stock, invest in them when they're useful, discard them when they drop. And 10 years ago, he and Rachel had history. Jonathan never knew how deep it ran. Until now. Back in the apartment, he watched Emma and Olivia sleep. 2 little chests rising and falling, the weight of the world pressing down on a man who'd once thought he had no right to be their father, and now realized he had every reason to fight like hell to stay. But if Marcus knew, if he found out Rachel was gone, he'd come for them. And the law might let him. The next morning, Jonathan met with Annalise Carter, his family lawyer. And she was sharp, cold-eyed, the kind of woman who drank her coffee black and made judges flinch. He handed her the letter. She read it in silence, then looked up. You're not listed on either birth certificate, she said. He is. Jonathan froze. How? Well, they must have him at birth. Maybe to keep some financial safety. Maybe under pressure. Can I contest that? Annalise leaned back. Technically, you're not the biological father. Legally, you're just a kind stranger unless you adopt them. We've had them since she died. I'm their guardian. She nodded. Temporary. If Marcus files for custody, it'll be a war. Jonathan's jaw tightened, then we fight. She paused. You do know what this means, don't you? Jonathan looked her dead in the eye. I lose them, and they go to a man Rachel begged me to protect them from. That's not an option. That night, Jonathan sat down with Emma. He didn't tell her everything. Just enough. There's someone who might try to say he's supposed to take care of you and Olivia, he said gently. But I won't let that happen. I promise you. Emma stared at him. Is it the man from the picture? Jonathan blinked. What picture? Emma got up, walked to her closet, and pulled down an old scrapbook. Inside was a photo. Rachel, younger, smiling, but not the smile Jonathan remembered. And next to her, a tall man in a navy suit, eyes too hard, hands on her waist like possession. Emma pointed. I saw him once, at the shelter. He gave Olivia a doll. Told her she looked like someone he used to know. Jonathan's blood turned to ice. He'd already found them. The next morning, Olivia was gone. Panic was instant. Jonathan tore through the apartment. The doorman hadn't seen her. The building's cameras showed nothing unusual. But then, Emma found a note tucked under Olivia's pillow. Written in purple crayon. I'm going with a nice man. He said Mommy knew him. Don't be mad, I just want to see her again. Jonathan drove like a madman. Straight to the old shelter. The receptionist recognized Olivia immediately. She was here yesterday with a man, mid-40s, slick, said he was her uncle. Jonathan showed her the photo. That's him, she confirmed. He said his name was Mr. Caldwell. They found Olivia 6 hours later. At a luxury hotel on the Upper East Side. Sitting in a velvet lobby chair, holding the same doll. Shaken but safe. She ran into Jonathan's arms the moment she saw him. He said he was Mommy's friend, she sobbed. He said you'd be mad because I reminded you of her. Jonathan held her so tightly she couldn't breathe. I'm not mad, he whispered. I'm never mad at you. The next morning, a custody petition was served. Marcus Caldwell was suing for full parental rights over Emma and his case? Biological paternity, financial capability, prior consent. And Jonathan? He's a man with no blood tie, no paperwork, and too much heart. But he wasn't going to lose. Not again. That night, as the girl slept in his bed, safe between two pillows and a wall of stories, Jonathan opened the journal again. And there it was. Second envelope. But he hadn't noticed it before. Inside, a birth certificate. Not government issued. Just a keepsake copy. Handwritten. And on Olivia's, in the father line, someone had scrawled Jonathan Reed Monroe in Rachel's script. It wasn't legal, but it was truth. And maybe, just maybe, it would be enough. Section 5. The courtroom, the recording, and the day the judge cried. The courthouse smelled like old paper and bitter coffee. Jonathan stood just outside the oak-paneled courtroom, staring at the brass plaque that read, Each family member. Ellen Rivers presenting. His tie was too tight, his palms damp. Inside, Emma clutched his hand with both of hers. Olivia, her thumb tucked firmly in her mouth, leaned against his side with a quiet, terrified trust that broke him. Across the hall, Marcus Caldwell adjusted his cufflinks like a man heading into a business meeting, not a battle for the souls of two little girls. He gave Jonathan a slight nod, not smug, just certain. Like he'd already bought the verdict. Inside the courtroom, the tension was suffocating. Marcus's legal team was armed to the teeth, suits sharp, binders thick, tone cold. Annalise Carter stood by Jonathan's side, fierce as a lioness. The judge, Ellen Rivers, was a woman in her late 60s, black robe, silver bun, eyes that had seen too many shattered families to be moved easily. She began. Mr. Caldwell, You claim paternity of Emma and Olivia Monroe and seek full custodial rights. Is that correct? Marcus stood. Your Honor, I have DNA test results proving I'm their biological father. I'm financially and emotionally prepared to raise them. Their mother, Rachel Monroe, and I were once. She was not in a relationship with you, Annalise interjected. She listed you under duress, and she left a written request that you not have custody. Objection, Your Honor, Marcus's attorney snapped. The letter is hearsay and was never filed with the court. Judge Rivers raised a hand. Let's hear from Mr. Monroe. Jonathan stood. His voice cracked but held. I've been caring for these girls since Rachel died. I knew Rachel for years. I knew the kind of fear she had when she mentioned Marcus's name. He was never a father. He was a threat. Marcus's lawyer cut in. He is their biological parent. You are not. Can you claim legal rights over them? Jonathan stepped forward. I can't claim legal rights, not yet, but I can claim this. He turned to Emma and Olivia, seated quietly at the back. They don't just need a father. They need someone who would burn down heaven and hell to keep them safe. And I would. Midway through the hearing, Marcus's team dropped their trump card, a legal deposition from 10 years ago, in which Rachel signed a confidentiality agreement to receive hush money in exchange for not listing Marcus publicly as the father. She made this choice, his attorney said. She accepted payment, signed away her right to raise them alone, and named Marcus Caldwell as the father. The judge's face hardened. This is serious. But then, Annalise stood. Your Honor, we request to play a recording. Judge Rivers looked skeptical. From whom? Rachel Monroe, Annalise said softly. This is from her private journal. The girls found it, hidden in a floorboard. With your permission, I'd like the court to hear her words in her own voice. The judge hesitated. Proceed. Annalise pressed play. Rachel's voice, soft, broken, alive, filled the courtroom. Of hearing this, then, I didn't make it. And that's okay, because I know my girls are with Jonathan, and that's the only reason I've been able to sleep at night. I didn't choose Marcus. I never did. I was scared, I was trapped, and I lied to protect them. But please, don't let him take them. He doesn't know them, he doesn't love them, he will use them the way he used me, and I'd rather die than let that happen again. Silence. Raw. Absolute. The judge took off her glasses, wiped her eyes, and for the first time in over 30 years on the bench, she cried. After recess, Marcus stood again. I've changed, he said. Yes, I was ambitious. Cold, maybe, but I'm not the man Rachel feared. I want to make amends. Judge Rivers leaned forward. You handed a doll to a grieving child and convinced her to leave a man who raised her. You used their confusion as a weapon. That tells me everything I need to know about the kind of father you'd be. Marcus tried to speak again, but the gavel hit. Mr. Monroe, she turned, would you still be willing to adopt them? Tears burned in Jonathan's eyes. In a heartbeat? Then this court grants you full and permanent custody, effective immediately. In the hallway outside, Emma stared up at him. Does this mean you're our real dad now? He knelt. I always was, but now the whole world knows it too. Olivia placed the doll, the one Marcus gave her, on a bench. I don't need her anymore, she whispered. She smells like lies. That night, they lit a candle in the rooftop garden. And for Rachel. Emma asked if her mom would be proud. Jonathan looked up at the stars and smiled. She already was. Section 6. The fire, the painting, and the woman at the art auction. The fire started in the laundry room. It was a quiet Sunday morning, unusually calm. Jonathan was making pancakes, his specialty, while Emma braided Olivia's hair on the porch. The girls were laughing. For a moment, it felt like the darkness of courtrooms and whispered secrets had been replaced by light. Then came the smoke. It rolled through the hallway like a warning, thick and dark and bitter. Jonathan dropped the spatula. Girls, outside, now! The fire department said it was electrical, faulty wiring, something no one could have seen coming. They lost almost everything. The journals, the drawings the girls made after Rachel's funeral, the old photograph of her and Jonathan from that 4th of July at the lake, the last real smile she ever gave. Gone. But no one was hurt. They were lucky, everyone said. But Jonathan didn't feel lucky watching Olivia cry because her blanket, the one her mom gave her, had turned to ash. They moved into a temporary shelter 2 blocks from downtown Denver. It was clean, safe, but cold, emotionally cold, the kind of place where whispers lingered in stairwells and children flinched in their sleep. Jonathan spent his nights wide awake, wondering, how do you rebuild a home when all the memories are smoke? 3 days later, a call came from an unknown number. He almost didn't answer. "Mr. Monroe?" A woman's voice, firm but graceful. "This is Caroline Blackwell. I believe we have something that once belonged to Rachel Monroe." Jonathan sat upright. "I'm listening." "There's an art auction tonight at the Wexler Gallery. One of the items is a painting, a portrait of a woman holding 2 children. The artist listed it as Rachel's Daughters. It was never meant for sale, but it slipped through an estate liquidation. I believe it was painted by Rachel, years ago." Jonathan's voice cracked. "She painted?" "She did. I run a foundation that collects lost works from artists who died without recognition. This piece, this story, mattered to her. I can tell. Come tonight. Please." The Wexler Gallery was a cathedral of silence and elegance. Gold-framed oil paintings shimmered under soft museum lighting. Wine glasses clinked. Laughter echoed, wealthy, empty. Jonathan felt like an intruder in his thrift store blazer. The girls held tight to his hands, wide-eyed and whispering. And then he saw it. The painting. It was large, almost floor-to-ceiling. Rachel's brushstrokes were raw, wild, and intimate. The woman in the center was unmistakably her. Her eyes fierce and wounded. In her arms were 2 little girls, one blonde, one with chestnut curls. Emma and Olivia. But what froze him wasn't the image. It was what Rachel had written in red across the canvas's bottom corner, barely visible, like a secret. "They are not my burden. They are my revenge, my redemption, and my resurrection." Jonathan's breath caught. And beside the painting stood a woman in black, elegant, older, with a silver streak in her hair. "Caroline Blackwell," she introduced herself softly. "You knew her?" Jonathan asked. "I knew of her," Caroline replied. "She submitted a portfolio to my foundation 12 years ago, anonymous. I never met her. But her work, it haunted me. And I've spent years tracking it. I believe this painting was meant to speak for her, long after she lost her voice." Jonathan stepped forward, awed. "I don't have the money for this. I can't let it go to some billionaire who'll hang it in a yacht bathroom." Caroline smiled. "That's why I called you." The auction began. Rachel's painting came up third. Bidding started at $10,000, 0 cents. Too high, way too high. Jonathan squeezed the bidding paddle in his hand, like it might turn into a check. $10,000, 0 cents, someone called. $15,000, 0 cents, another bidder raised. $25,000, 0 cents. $35,000, 0 cents. Jonathan stood frozen. And then Caroline Blackwell stood. "I bid $1, she announced. The entire room turned. The auctioneer blinked. "Miss Blackwell, the bid is currently—" "I bid $1 on behalf of the family of the woman who painted this, because this is not for sale. It never was." Silence. Stunning, reverent silence. "I am donating the full matching value of the highest bid to Rachel Monroe's Memorial Arts Fund," Caroline declared. "But the painting goes home, to the only people it ever belonged to." Back at the shelter, the girls stared up at the canvas now resting gently against the far wall of their small room. Emma traced her own face in paint. "She painted us, before we were even big." Jonathan nodded. "She saw you, before the world did." And Olivia, in a whisper, "Is this what love looks like?" He wrapped both girls in his arms. "Nora, this is what forever looks like." Session 7. The ring, the grave, and the man in the black SUV. It had been 3 weeks since the fire. 3 weeks since Jonathan and the girls moved into the shelter, since Rachel's painting returned to them like a voice from beyond the grave. But one thing haunted Jonathan more than anything: the gold ring. The girls found it while sifting through ashes in what had once been Rachel's bedroom. Blackened but intact, the ring was thick, masculine, and heavy, engraved on the inside with "They are released when they are ready." Neither Jonathan nor the girls had ever seen it before. And Rachel had never spoken of a man with those initials. It was Olivia who asked first. "Daddy," she whispered, holding the ring tightly in her palm, "was this yours?" Jonathan shook his head slowly. "No, baby, that doesn't belong to me." "Then who was he?" Emma asked, eyes sharp. "Who's JR?" Jonathan hesitated. "I don't know." But he did. He remembered something. A name that Rachel had muttered once in her sleep when they were newly married, back when she still reached for him in the night and hadn't yet pulled away. "James," she had whispered, followed by, "Forgive me." That night, Jonathan drove alone. The girls stayed behind with Caroline Blackwell, who had begun visiting more frequently, tutoring Olivia in painting and giving Emma a journal with a soft leather cover. Jonathan drove 2 hours west, to a cemetery in the hills near Boulder. The name etched in granite nearly made his knees buckle. James R. Walker, 1976, 2016. A soldier, a dreamer, a father. Jonathan stood frozen in front of them. The question mark at the end of the epitaph wasn't carved by mistake. It was Rachel's handwriting, chiseled in stone. And beside the grave, half hidden behind ivy and dried leaves, was a small, rusted tin box. Inside it, a photo. Rachel, younger, freckles, smiling, holding hands with a man in army fatigues. The same face from Olivia's features, the same sharp jaw Emma had. The resemblance was undeniable. And taped behind the photo, a birth certificate. Emma Louise Monroe Walker. Father unknown. Rachel Monroe. Rachel Monroe. The bottom half had been scribbled over in pen, then erased, then rewritten in shaking hands. Jonathan staggered backward. Had raised those girls, loved them like they were his own. But the truth was screaming at him now. Rachel had kept a secret so large it could split their world in half. By the time he drove back to Denver, but he wasn't alone. Parked across the street from the shelter was a sleek black SUV, windows tinted, engine off. Waiting. Jonathan felt a chill. He didn't approach, just watched. 5 minutes passed, then 10, and then the driver's door opened. A man stepped out, tall, in a charcoal coat, gray at the temples, sharp eyes. And he didn't look like someone who belonged near. He looked like someone who'd walked away from money or power, or both. Jonathan stepped into the light of the street lamp. "Can I help you?" The man turned slowly. "I don't know why it is, but I believe I can help you." They sat on the curb, just the two of them. The SUV still idled behind them, like a beast holding its breath. "My name is Jackson Reed Walker," the man said. "James Walker was my younger brother." Jonathan nodded slowly, jaw tight. "I came here because, well, Rachel and James, they had a child together. Maybe 2. Jonathan didn't answer. "I only found out after James died. A box showed up at my doorstep one day. No return address. Inside it was a letter from Rachel. She wrote that James didn't know he had children, that she'd kept them safe by keeping them hidden." Jonathan stared at him. "So, why now?" Jackson's expression shifted. "Because that ring your daughter found? It was my brother's. And because there's a trust in James's name, meant for his children. I'm the executor." Jonathan's chest burned. Are you here for them? For the girls? Jackson met his eyes. I'm here for the truth, that's all, and to see if they're okay. They're my daughters. Jonathan's voice cracked. I raised them. I stayed when Rachel broke down, when she locked herself in that room for days. I made them pancakes. I walked Olivia through her nightmares. I taught Emma how to ride a bike without training wheels. Jackson nodded slowly. I'm not here to take them, I promise you that, but I think you and I need to talk. The next morning, Jackson returned, but this time he brought something with him. A sealed manila envelope. Jonathan opened it with shaking hands. Inside were two things. A DNA test confirming James Walker was indeed the biological father of both girls, and a notarized letter from Rachel Monroe, dated 3 years before her death. You'll ever read this. If I die, please understand that I kept secrets not to deceive, but to protect. James was the love of my life, but his death destroyed me. When I met Jonathan, I needed to believe I could start over, and I did. He was good to the girls, better than I ever expected. He is not their blood, but he is their father. Please, don't take them from him. Jonathan sat in silence, tears hot in his eyes. I don't care what the papers say, he whispered. They're my girls. Jackson placed a firm hand on his shoulder. I believe you. As the girls played outside, unaware of the storm quietly passing around them, Jonathan finally exhaled. The truth didn't change love, but it did light the path forward. And somewhere in the soft sunlight of a Denver morning, he heard Rachel's voice again, not in pain, but in peace. They are not my burden, they are my redemption. Into Session 8. The adoption papers, the school scandal, and the day Emma ran away. The morning started like any other. Jonathan woke early, fixed oatmeal just the way Olivia liked it, with too much cinnamon and a swirl of honey. Emma sat by the window, sketching something in her journal. It was quiet, almost peaceful, until the envelope arrived. A plain manila envelope slid under their door at the shelter. No return address, just one word in black marker. Guardian. Jonathan opened it with trembling fingers. Inside, legal documents. Adoption papers. Filed. Signs, stamped, from a Denver attorney's office, dated nearly 6 years ago. But he never filed them. He never officially adopted Emma and Olivia. And now, someone knew. It didn't take long for the news to spread. One of the shelter volunteers, a well-meaning but gossip-prone woman named Marcy, saw the envelope on the envelope. By noon, the whispers had begun. Those girls aren't even his. We've not their real father. Isn't that the woman who overdosed? By evening, it had reached the school. Emma and Olivia were pulled aside in front of their classmates and quietly escorted to the principal's office. Not for discipline, but for evaluation. I'm sorry, Principal Hartley said, not quite meeting Jonathan's eyes when he arrived. Until we verify guardianship, the district can't legally permit them on campus. Jonathan stared at her. We've been here 6 years. I am their guardian. You were, she said softly, but unless you have current legal documentation, I'm afraid the system sees otherwise. That night, Emma didn't come home. Olivia clutched her blanket on the cot, sobbing quietly. I told her not to go, she whispered. I told her to wait for you. Jonathan's heart thudded. Where did she go? Olivia pointed to the corner of her journal. In a scrawl Emma had written that morning. I'm going to fix it. I'm going to make them believe he's our dad. Jonathan barely grabbed his coat before he bolted into the night. Denver was cold that time of year. He searched the streets first, the bookstore Emma loved, the playground where she sketched the clouds, the alley behind the art gallery where Rachel once painted a mural with her when she was 5. Nothing. It wasn't until he circled back near the school that he saw it. The light in the art room. Gone. Jonathan raced inside. And there she was. Emma stood by the easel, paint on her hands, her eyes swollen from crying. But what she had painted stopped him in his tracks. A portrait. Him. Not perfect, not posed, but real. Jonathan, sitting at the edge of her hospital bed, holding a stuffed giraffe in one hand, tears in his eyes. The day she had her appendix removed. And at the top, scrawled in bold red letters, "A father is not just DNA." "Emma," he said gently, stepping forward. She didn't turn. "They called me a liar, Daddy, at school, said I was pretending you were ours, that you just took us in to look good, that we're not your real family." Jonathan knelt beside her, heart aching. "Do you believe that?" She finally looked at him. "No, but I want them to stop saying it." He nodded, blinking fast. "Then let's make it official." The next morning, Jonathan called Jackson Walker. "I need your help," he said simply. Within 24 hours, the trust funded an emergency legal team. Papers and Rachel's notarized letter, the one declaring Jonathan as the girl's true father in heart and home, became the final piece. By week's end, a judge signed the order. Jonathan Monroe was now, legally and irrevocably, the father of Emma and Olivia. But just when peace seemed within reach, another blow came. An email, sent anonymously to every parent in the district. Subject line: "Do you know who's raising children at your school?" Inside was a photo of Jonathan, blurry from years ago, being handcuffed outside a bar. A mugshot, from the night Rachel overdosed, when he'd taken the fall for possession to keep her out of jail. The record had been sealed, but someone found it and used it. The school board held an emergency meeting. Emma and Olivia were suspended pending review of Jonathan's background. Reporters began circling the shelter. One woman even followed Olivia home. That night, Emma locked herself in the bathroom. Again. Jonathan knocked. "Sweetheart, please, talk to me." Nothing. He slid to the floor, back against the door, voice hoarse. "I didn't protect your mom like I should have. I let her hide in silence. I won't make that mistake with you." Pause. Then the lock clicked. Emma opened the door. She didn't say anything. She just walked into his arms and held him like the world was on fire again. It was Jackson who showed up the next day. Not in a suit but in jeans, his sleeves rolled up, face hard. "We're done playing defense," he said. "I made some calls." "What kind of calls?" Jonathan asked. Jackson glanced at the camera crew setting up outside. "The kind that gets national attention." That night, they held a press conference. Not for the drama, but for the truth. Jonathan stood beside Olivia and Emma, holding up the painting Emma made, the one of him by her bedside. "She calls me Dad," he said into the microphone, "not because I gave her DNA, but because I stayed, through every fever, every recital, every heartbreak." The crowd was silent, until Olivia stepped forward and said, voice trembling, "The reason I still believe in people." And Emma added, "He's the only one who never left." By morning, the tide had turned. Articles flooded in. "Shelter father's fight for his daughters goes viral." "DNA doesn't make a dad, love does." Painting that changed a school board. And in a closed-door meeting 2 days later, the district reinstated both girls. With a public apology. That night, Jonathan tucked Olivia into bed. Emma stood in the doorway, holding something in her hands. It was the adoption certificate. "Can we hang this?" she asked quietly. Jonathan looked at her, eyes full. "Anywhere you want." She nodded, walked to the wall above her cot and taped it up. Then added something beneath it. A little post-it note. In her handwriting, "Family made by choice, sealed by love, Section 9. The DNA, the protest, and the day Olivia spoke on stage." The letter arrived on a Wednesday. Folded in thirds. No return address, no signature, just a printed message and something that fell out with it. A lab report. DNA test results. Paternity test, 0%. Jonathan stared at it in silence. The words blurred. "You're not their father, and the world deserves to know." Beneath it, a note scrawled in red pen. "Tell them, or we will." That night, Olivia was unusually quiet at dinner. Emma was chattering about a mural competition at school, but Olivia just picked at her food, her shoulders tight. Jonathan finally asked, "Did something happen?" She hesitated. Some of the older kids said they saw the news. "What news?" "There's this video going around," she whispered. "About you. About how you're not our real dad." Emma dropped her fork. "They what?" Jonathan stood, heart hammering. He hadn't told them. He was waiting for the right moment. But the world didn't wait. That video, grainy, spliced together with photos from the shelter and clips from the court hearing, painted a cruel narrative. A fraud pretending to be a father for sympathy and donations. The internet exploded. And the school? It folded fast. The principal called the next morning. "We've suspended the girls from extracurriculars, indefinitely, just until this clears up." Jonathan's voice cracked. "You mean until I stop being their father?" A beat of silence. "It's about public optics." He hung up without replying. Jackson Walker arrived later that night with fire in his eyes. "We don't get to rewrite your story." He handed Jonathan a thick file. "This is a countersuit for defamation, emotional harm, and targeted harassment of minors." Jonathan glanced at the paperwork, then looked toward the girls' room. "Jackson, this isn't just about law anymore. It's about shame." "It's about truth," Jackson shot back, "and it's time to remind people what that looks like." The community rallied first. Then the city? Within 48 hours, students began organizing a walkout in protest of the district's treatment of Olivia and Emma. Signs began appearing all over Denver. "DNA Dad." "Love is legal too." "Let Olivia sing?" Because the real spark came from what Olivia had been preparing for weeks in secret. The Winter Arts Festival. A public school stage, her first solo. And now, they were taking that away too. Jonathan found her outside the shelter, staring up at the mural she'd helped paint with Emma. "Olivia," he said gently, stepping beside her. "We don't have to fight this battle. We can go quiet, leave this city if we have to." She turned, her eyes calm. "Now," she said, "you stayed for us. I'm staying for you." He was stunned. Her voice wasn't loud, but it was firm. That night, she asked him to drive her to the auditorium. "I have something to say," she whispered, "and I want the world to hear it from me." The auditorium was already filling when they arrived. Cameras lined the back wall, news vans outside, protesters waving banners. But inside, it was still. And when Olivia stepped out onto the stage, the lights catching the soft gold of her dress, a hush fell. No music yet. Just a microphone and the soft sound of her breath. Then she spoke. "My name is Olivia Monroe. I was born to someone I barely remember. But I was raised by a man who stayed. He made me breakfast, even when I cried for my mom. He learned to braid my hair, even though his hands shook. He stood outside my classroom when I had nightmares. He's the reason I know what it means to be loved. So if DNA makes someone a father, I guess I'll never have one. But if showing up counts, then I have the best dad in the world." The room went silent. And then she sang. It's a cover of Stand By Me. Soft, clear, unshaken. By the final note, the crowd was weeping. And so was Jonathan. The next morning, the video of Olivia's performance hit 3 million views. Celebrities shared it. Educators wept online. People across the country began donating to the shelter under the name Project Monroe. More than that, public opinion flipped. The district board held an emergency vote. Unanimous decision, reinstatement of both girls, public apology issued. And the state legislature, they passed a resolution named after Olivia. The Monroe Clause, protecting non-biological guardians with long-term caregiving status from school discrimination. But in the middle of all the celebration, Jackson handed Jonathan a photo. "I traced the envelope," he said, "the one with the DNA test." Jonathan looked at it. It was grainy, but the face was familiar. His breath caught. Jackson nodded. Her brother, Rachel's, the one who vanished after her death. He's back, and he's coming for custody. Section 10. The brother, the betrayal, and the battle for their hearts. He arrived in a gray suit, carrying a briefcase and wearing a cross around his neck. Caleb Monroe. Rachel's brother, a name buried deep in closed adoption files, absent from her funeral, her estate, and her children's lives. Until now, "I'm here to claim what's mine," he told the court. "My nieces." He never even looked at them, just at Jonathan. And for the first time in years, Jonathan Whitaker, former billionaire, now a man with dirt beneath his nails and calluses on his hands, felt afraid. Not for himself, for the girls. Caleb didn't want visitation. He wanted custody, full, immediate. He claimed Rachel left the girls with him in a will no one had ever seen. Claimed Jonathan had manipulated a grieving woman, that the shelter was corrupt, that Olivia and Emma had been raised in a lie. And he had documents. Or so he said. Until the judge leaned forward and asked one simple question. "Where were you for the last 7 years?" His answer? "I didn't know they existed." Outside the courthouse, protesters returned, but this time it wasn't for Jonathan. It was for Olivia and Emma. They held signs that read, "We choose him. We raised us." Blood doesn't mean father. Even local politicians stood behind the girls. But none of it mattered, more than what Olivia said on the stand. "I don't remember my mom's voice," she began, "but I remember the first time I called him Dad. He didn't ask me to. I just did." She paused, her eyes locked on Caleb. "You think showing up now means something? We begged for family for years. You never came. And now that the cameras are watching, you want to play the hero?" She turned to the judge, her voice breaking. "I won't go with him. Even if the law says I have to, my heart won't." Then Emma walked up, not to the stand but to Caleb, in front of everyone. She held out something in her tiny hand. It was the ring, the one Rachel had left behind, the one Olivia had worn on a chain, the same ring Jonathan had once found tucked inside the baby blanket Rachel used to swaddle Olivia. You know this?" Emma asked. Caleb hesitated. She narrowed her eyes. "Because my real dad does?" The judge recessed for 72 hours. Jackson Walker turned to Jonathan outside the courtroom. "If Caleb has that will, we're in trouble. But if he does," Jonathan said, "because Rachel never would have trusted him, not after what he did." Jackson blinked. "Wait, what?" Jonathan nodded slowly. "Rachel told me once. Caleb left when their father died, took money from the estate, disappeared. She was devastated. She said, 'If anything happens to me, promise me you'll protect them from him.'" "You told the court that?" Natalia said, "Because I wasn't sure she meant it legally, but I know she meant it in her heart." That night, Olivia came to Jonathan's room holding something wrapped in old flannel. It was Rachel's journal. They'd thought it was lost in the fire, but Emma had hidden it, scared that the grown-ups would fight over it. Olivia laid it in his lap. "Mom wrote about you," she whispered. "A lot." Jonathan flipped to the final page. The ink was faded, but her words hit like thunder. "I don't know if I'll survive this illness, but if I don't, I pray they stay with him, with the man who gave up his name, his company, and his freedom just to hold them at night. Jonathan is more than their guardian. He's their home." He stared at the page for a long time. Then he kissed Olivia's forehead. "Let's go finish this." Day 3 in court. Caleb's lawyer presented a scanned, unsigned will, dated weeks before Rachel's death. It mentioned Caleb, vaguely. Didn't include the girls by name. Didn't name a guardian. Didn't hold up. Then Jackson Walker stood and presented a notarized journal entry, a hospital video recording of Rachel handing the babies to Jonathan, and 2 written affidavits from nurses at Denver Mercy confirming she designated him sole care. And then, Olivia asked to speak. Not as a witness. As herself. As a daughter. She walked to the front of the courtroom, in her thrift store jacket and ballet flats. She looked at the judge, at the crowd. And then, gently, at Caleb. "I forgive you," she said quietly, "because my mom would have wanted that. But I won't go with you, because you didn't lose sleep when I had fevers. You didn't skip dinner when we ran out of food. You didn't hold my hand at night when I was scared." To turn to Jonathan. Why, he did, every day, every hour, for 7 years. Then she looked back to the judge. "I choose him." The gavel came down 3 hours later. Permanent guardianship awarded to Jonathan Whitaker. Caleb exited through the side door, never once looking back. The courtroom burst into tears, not applause, just tears, quiet, aching, relieved. Jonathan didn't cry until he was back home. And Emma handed him a drawing she'd made. A house with 3 hearts. Hers, Olivia's, and his. Epilogue, 1 year later. The shelter had expanded, now rebranded as Rachel's Place, funded entirely by anonymous donors and community grants. Emma won first prize in the National Art Mural Contest. Olivia gave a TED Talk on Chosen Family and sang at Carnegie Hall. And Jonathan? He stood at the edge of their backyard garden, watching the girls laugh beneath the old magnolia tree, and whispered into the wind. "Rachel, I kept my promise. Rachel's promise, Jonathan's redemption, and the family that chose love." The garden bloomed early that year. Not because of the weather. But because Olivia insisted on planting magnolias, Rachel's favorite, and Emma whispered to each seed as if they were magic. And in a way, they were. Because this wasn't just a home. It was a resurrection. A quiet, stubborn resurrection of hope. Of what was broken, but not beyond healing. Of love not built from blood or legacy but something stronger. Choice. For years, Jonathan Whitaker had built empires with contracts, stock options, and mergers. But in the end, it wasn't a billion-dollar company that made him a father. It was a hand-drawn picture, taped to his refrigerator, that said, "Thank you for not leaving." Rachel Monroe had died young. Too young. But in her final moments, she didn't ask for fame or fortune or even forgiveness. She asked for one thing. "I don't make it. Promise me they'll never feel alone." And Jonathan, flawed, grieving, humbled, kept that promise. Not just with food and shelter, but with bedtime stories, makeshift Halloween costumes, and late-night fevers soothed with trembling hands. He didn't replace Rachel. In that moment, he honored her by raising her girls with the kind of love that costs everything and gives everything back. Olivia, now 13, still wears her mother's ring on a chain. But she added a new one beside it, a key to the shelter, to her story. She tells it often now, not for attention, but because she knows what it means to someone who's felt forgotten. She says, "Family is not just who you're born to. Sometimes it's who shows up and stays." Emma, small and sensitive, once hid under beds and cried at loud noises. Now, she paints. Big, beautiful murals, stories of skies and houses and stars, with names written in them. And in every mural, somewhere hidden, is a little red heart. That's Jonathan. Her anchor. Her dad. This story wasn't about orphans or billionaires. It was about something all of us carry, whether we're 6 or 66. The longing to be chosen. Not because of who we're expected to be, but because of who we already are. It reminds us that sometimes the most powerful kind of love isn't loud, isn't perfect, isn't planned. It's the love that stays in the room when everyone else walks out. The love that sacrifices reputation, power, and pride just to make a child feel safe. And sometimes, redemption doesn't come with grand gestures. Sometimes it's as quiet as a little girl whispering "Daddy" for the first time and meaning it. Blood doesn't define family, loyalty does. Grief doesn't end a story, it transforms it. Redemption is possible, but it costs humility. The greatest legacy you can leave isn't money, it's love. If you've failed before, that doesn't disqualify you from becoming someone's hero today. A message to every woman watching. Maybe you've been where Rachel was, alone, afraid, doing your best with very little. Maybe you've been where Olivia is, trying to find your voice in a world that doesn't always listen. Or maybe you've been where Jonathan stood, broken, ashamed, wondering if love would ever knock again. This story is for you. Because love can knock again. Even if it looks different. Even if it takes time. Even if it's not how you imagined. Healing is possible. Family is possible. And sometimes, the best stories begin when you think yours is over. Help us share this message. If this story touched you, if it made you cry, if it reminded you that second chances are real, like this video to support more stories that matter. Comment your favorite moment or line, we read every single one. Share this with someone who needs hope right now. Because the world doesn't just need more noise. It needs more stories that heal. This was They Knocked on a Billionaire CEO's Door in a Snowstorm. But it could have been called The Girls Who Chose Their Dad. A promise that didn't die with her. And the man who lost everything and gained a family. However you name it, one thing is true. Love wins. Every time. Even in the snow. Even after the fire. Even when the world says it's too late. It's never too late to become home for someone